Hey everyone, my name is Kelly Daly, and in today's video, I'm going to show you all the different formative assessment types that you should be using in your high school classroom. I love using quick little formative assessment checks for understanding in my classroom, as it helps me provide mastery-oriented feedback that will help guide my students in terms of their own learning and help guide myself in terms of my future instruction. So I've put together this list of the 7 best formative assessment types for your classroom that I hope you find helpful as you begin planning out your next formative assessment. Before we jump in, if you are looking to create those expert learners in your classroom and you're looking to maybe switch up to a standards-based grading system, make sure to click that link below, as it will bring you to a free guidebook on how to set up a standards-based grading system in your high school classroom. All right, so you might be wondering, what is a formative assessment? And how does that even differ than a summative assessment? So in my personal view, I think of formative assessments as quick little check-ins or check for understanding with your students. My personal definition of a formative assessment is using a quick little check-in game to just get a sense of where student learning is at in a specific moment of time. Formative assessments should be occurring during the process of learning. And this is different than a summative assessment, because a summative assessment, like a test or a project, is geared to assess the end product of what a student has learned. So after going through the learning process, how much has that student learned? And so formative assessments can be super powerful in your instructional toolbox, because as you are teaching students, you can be getting a sense of, are they understanding what I just taught them? If yes, great, let's keep going on. But if not, then hold up. I need to step back and maybe change out how I'm going to teach this particular topic to my students. I have come to love using formative assessments in the classroom because it really does help guide not only my instruction within the classroom, but it can be really helpful for students to get feedback on how well they are understanding something during that learning process. So if they see that they're not getting it, they have that chance to go ahead and make adjustments and improvements in their own learning tactics. So let me show you the 7 best formative assessment types that I use in my high school science classroom. The first one are exit tickets. So exit tickets are often the type of formative assessment that you may think of, but I love using them. And I've gone through different ways of using exit tickets in the classroom, but being that I'm at a higher level with high school students, I like to use more standardized test questions for my exit tickets, because within the classroom, my assessments are more project-based and more real-world aligned. So I don't necessarily have a chance to throw in those standardized test questions that students do need to become familiar with. So I use exit tickets at the end of a lesson to pose a question from a standardized test. So if I teach high school biology, I will use a standardized test question from the state test that they have to take in June. I will pull a question that is tied to the day's lesson, usually an open response, sometimes a multiple choice question. And students, that question will show up on my board. I will have it projected for students. And the way I use my exit tickets is, instead of having students fill their answer out on a little slip of paper and then having to collect the paper and make sure students' names are on papers, my system has really kind of fine-tuned itself over the years. Up on my board, there's a QR code that will pull up a Google form, which for students without phones, I do have the form in Google Classroom. But students scan the QR code on the board next to the question, and it pulls up a Google form, and students type in their answer into that Google form. And it's super easy to then track all student answers. As Google Forms, you can export all responses to a nice spreadsheet. And it allows me to quickly go through and grade the exit ticket responses and provide pretty immediate feedback. When I do say grade, because formative assessments are assessments occurring during the learning process, they are not graded in my gradebook. Formative assessments, because students are practicing, it's just a form of feedback. So students can say, hey, I am not mastering this topic yet, so I need to go back and refine my practice. Whereas, hey, I did really well with this question. It seems like I get it and I can move on. So the exit ticket is a form of feedback for students, which, because I use the Google Forms, I can give that feedback pretty immediately the next day. The next type of formative assessment that I love to use in my classroom are using mini whiteboards. So thankfully, I have a set of mini whiteboards that was left by the previous teacher in my classroom. But if you don't have some, there's lots of low-cost options for you to get mini whiteboards. I've seen them at the dollar store. I've even seen where you just take you can laminate, or you can get those little plastic pocket folders and you can just put a piece of white paper in it and students can write on it with dry erase markers. Or you can even use your desks. Just make sure you test it out first, but I know at our school, most of the desks you can write on with dry erase marker and it does wipe off pretty well. So I like to use mini whiteboards as a form of formative assessment where they are out in the classroom. And I usually do them one per group, not necessarily one per person because I don't have enough. But I pose a question to the class, the groups work together to solve the problem or write their answer up, and then when I say go, the class holds up their boards and I can quickly get a sense of where every student or every group is at. And if I see the majority of groups, struggling and not getting it, then I can go back and reteach. But if it seems like majority has got it, then I know I can move on. So it's a really low cost, easy way to get immediate feedback to guide my instruction. The next type of formative assessment that I truly love is the use of clicker questions. So in my classroom, I don't have the actual clickers that you think of when you hear of clicker questions. You might be so lucky to have that technology, but if not, there are lots of other options to do clicker questions. And I would put clicker questions kind of on the same side of whiteboards. It's just maybe a little bit more tech-based. If you don't have clickers available to you, there are lots of other ways to use clicker questions. Generally, because a clicker only has so many buttons, a clicker question is a multiple choice question, not open-ended. And so there are different ways you can do this. My favorite way that I've seen this done was by a college professor. And what she did was she passed out 4 different sheets of paper. Each sheet was a different color. So we had pink, green, blue, and yellow. And she told us, answer A is pink and so on. So each color represented a different answer choice. And so she'd pull up a multiple choice question up on the projector and students would just hold up their colored paper corresponding to the answer. And as a teacher, you can quickly scan for colors. And, if I'm expecting all pink and I see half pink and half green, then I know that there's something I need to go back and reteach. So this is a very low cost way of a clicker question. Now, you might have a little bit more technology available to you. So for the next kind of clicker option is a website called Plickers with a P, not a C. And so Plickers is an app that you can get on your smartphone. So if you have a smartphone, you could use this. And what it is there's QR codes that you could print for every student. And the QR code being 4-sided, each side would correspond to an answer choice for a multiple choice question. So depending on which way they hold up the QR code, so if the A side is at the top, they are answering A. And then as the teacher, you take your smartphone and you scan all the QR codes in the classroom, and up on your phone, you will get immediate feedback of how many people picked A, B, C, and D. And what's nice about this option is it's anonymous. So you may have seen with whiteboards or even the option of holding up paper that students look around. Well, everyone's picking pink, so let me hold up pink. Or everyone wrote answer C, so let me hold up answer C. The QR code option kind of takes that away because students don't know what other students are answering because all they see is a QR code. And so I highly recommend you check out Plickers. So again, it starts with a P, not a C. And it's a great tool that will allow you to get quick feedback about where your students are in their understanding. Formative assessment type number 4 that I want to talk about is the use of interactive presentations. So if your school does not have an account with Pear Deck or Nearpod, I highly recommend checking it out because Pear Deck and Nearpod, while they're two different tools, they almost do the identical thing. So what it is you create a slideshow. I like to use Google Slides. I believe it would work with PowerPoint, but you'd have to double check that. But you put together a slideshow, and then with Pear Deck, which I've used more than Nearpod, in your Google Slide, there's an extension in the Google app that will allow you to add on Pear Deck to it. And this creates an interactive presentation. It will allow you to add questions to slides in your PowerPoint. So you might have a question to pose to the class, you can put it on your slide, and then you add that interactive piece. So when you're going to present your slides, you have the students log in with a code that's associated with the presentation, and the students on their devices, whether it be a computer or a phone, they can then answer questions as you're giving your presentation. So this is super, super, super powerful because you might have multiple choice questions. You might have students draw something during a presentation, and you can in real time see all that feedback. You can even showcase anonymously student answers. So if you had them draw to show that they understand something, you can pull that up without student names attached to each one on your board and show what each student drew. So you can say, hey, look, this one was correct, but maybe this one didn't do something correct. And you can showcase all of that right there anonymously. And that's pretty powerful. Nearpod allows you a lot of those same features where students can answer multiple choice questions, open-ended questions, draw answers. And it's a really great way for you as the teacher to see where your students are in their understanding. Formative assessment type 5 is using learning games. And there are lots of learning games out there, but some of my favorite include Kahoot, Quizzes, Quizlet Live, and Gimkit. There's so many out there, so really find one or two learning games that you can handle setting up yourself and become good at to use in your classroom. So I personally use Kahoot the most because I just find it the easiest to use. But these learning games are fun for the students. They're super engaged with it. They join either on a laptop or a phone, and it's a question comes up and it's usually who can answer it the quickest. And most of the time it's multiple choice questions. I've seen true and false questions, occasionally like a write the answer response. But again, it gives you quick, immediate feedback. So if I make a Kahoot about biotic versus abiotic factors, I can quickly see the breakdown of students that they can identify the difference between biotic and abiotic, and then I can tell the students that just really have no idea what's going on when I get that report back about who did what within the game. And students love these games. I know with Kahoot, it's all about earning points, about getting things right the fastest. I know within Gimkit, it's all about earning money, and then that money can be used to get power-ups, and students just love this. It's like a video game, and who wouldn't love that? So you can use these as forms of review, but also to allow you to get a sense of where students are in their understanding. So formative assessment type number 6 is to use surveys. So of the ones that we've talked about so far, most of these types of formative assessment have to do with you, the teacher, getting collecting information about where your students are in their learning and then adjusting your practice. So with this type of formative assessment, using a survey, you're really getting the students to reflect on their own learning so that way they can then go make adjustments to their own learning tactics. So a survey I like to use using Google Forms, where I pose questions to students about, what do you know really well? What are topics that you feel like you don't understand? And it's really getting them to reflect on their own understanding. You tell me where you are not getting something. And I tell the students it's okay to not understand something. But by using this survey, I do get to see where students see themselves in terms of their own understanding, but it's really, really helpful for my students to have that piece of self-reflection to hopefully then realize, hey, I need to go back and study this topic because I just don't get it. And last but not least, formative assessment type 7 is using in-class activities. So I saved this one for last because oftentimes we don't think of classwork as being a formative assessment because we do grade it. However, in my classroom, things that we do in the class, so an activity, a worksheet, all of these things are meant to be practice during the learning process. So we've gone over something, I've just lectured them on some new material. Now we're going to do an activity to really dive in deeper with the topic. Well, the activity that we're doing, they just learned the topic. So there's no way they're going to be a master just yet. Granted, there could be some, but most likely not. So I don't believe that classwork should really have a grade attached to it, which is a very different opinion. Formative assessments should not have grades in the gradebook because they are practice. What they should have is feedback for students that will drive what they need to do to improve. So I use my in-class assignments as a form of formative assessment, meaning that I will give them feedback. Oftentimes, rather than not, the students are giving each other the feedback because what we do is I save time to go over the activity within class, and students can then swap papers with someone else and then literally give the feedback that I would have had to do. So this not only saves me time in terms of grading, but now students are looking at other people's work and they're thinking about what was right or wrong and having to provide that feedback for someone else. So students get feedback that they can see and then take that feedback to hopefully improve in their own learning. So to me, in-class assignments are formative rather than summative, and they do not get a grade in the gradebook. And you might be thinking, hold up, what's the incentive to get my students to do their work? Well, in my classroom, the way I help motivate them to get work done is not by having them get points, because now we're just playing the game of school. They're just going to do it just to get their points. So what I do instead is I put a grade for completion in their gradebook that doesn't actually have a numerical grade tied to it. It's just a form of communication home. So if they did the classwork that day and they corrected it, they did what they were supposed to do, they will get the word done next to that assignment. For students that didn't correct it, they didn't follow along, they didn't do what they're supposed to, they'll get not done or incomplete, some variation of that. And so when it comes time to have conversations with parents or I bringing up concerns to the student and families, I can look across the classwork that they should have done to help guide them to mastery. And if they're not doing it, if there's a lot of incompletes there, then I have that evidence to say, well, you are not getting your formative work done that should be helping you get to mastery. So obviously there's a struggle there. So that's the incentive, because I'm still communicating in the gradebook where students are completing work and not completing work, but there's no numerical grade attached to it. Because I use a standards-based grading system, and grades are tied to standards, not to assignments. So I like to use my classwork as that form of formative assessment within the classroom. So these are my 7 favorite formative assessment types that I use within my high school science classroom. So try them out if you have never tried them before. I highly recommend them because they can help inform your own instruction as well as help inform students on how they can improve in their own learning. And if you're curious about more of my standards-based grading system that I use in my classroom, make sure to click that link below, as it will bring you to a free guidebook that would walk you through step-by-step how to set up your own standards-based grading system today. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to talking with you soon.